May 17th, 1943. Western approaches, North Atlantic. Wind screams over the open bridge of HMS Duke, a battered river-class frigate, as green water slams across her bow and explodes into icy spray. Lieutenant Commander Edward Ted Markham braces himself against the rail, oilskins snapping in the gale, eyes narrowed toward the black, heaving horizon. Somewhere out there, beyond radar, beyond eyesight, Donit's U-boats prowl, hunting the convoy that churns westward behind him in a scattered, wavering line of dim running lights. But tonight, Duke is hunting with something else. Below decks, in a cramped compartment that smells of warm bakelite, cigarette smoke, and damp wool, a new kind of war is taking shape. Lieutenant Alan Fraser, Royal Naval Volunteer Reserve, bends over a strange console bolted to the bulkhead, a tangle of vacuum tubes, rotary switches, and a strip chart recorder that ticks steadily, feeding a thin ribbon of paper from a narrow slot. Beside it, a gray metal junction box bears a painted stencil, Admiralty Experimental Station, not to be landed. From the escort's stern, spooling out into the black Atlantic, a long, thick cable trails silently in the wake. At its far end, hundreds of yards behind the ship, a towed array of hydrophones drifts beneath the surface, listening. Not for depth charge explosions, not for acid echoes, but for the sea itself. Fraser lifts heavy headphones over his cap, the cable stretching from the set across his shoulders. He glances at the rating beside him. Power up, Stokes. Let's hear what His Majesty's Bloody Ocean has to say tonight. A soft hum rises as valves warm. The room vibrates with the low, almost subsonic thrumming of Duke's own engines, a familiar oceanic roar. And then, beneath it, a forest of faint clicks, murmurs, and distant rumbles that no human ear, unaided, has ever truly heard. Up on the bridge, Markham steps inside the chart house, wiping his face with a gloved hand. The convoy plot glows weakly in red light. Grease pencil arcs show estimated U-boat Wolfpack positions based on signals intelligence and yesterday's sightings. He doesn't trust any of it, not fully. The sea moves. U-boats move faster. He leans into the voice pipe. "Sound room, this is the captain. Anything from your new Admiralty wizardry, Mr. Fraser?" There's a crackle, then Fraser's voice, oddly distant. "Still adjusting levels, sir. A lot of background tonight. But we are hearing things far beyond ASDC range." Markham snorts softly. "If you find me a periscope at 15 miles, Mr. Fraser, I'll have the steward open a bottle we don't technically have aboard." Below, Fraser doesn't smile. He's listening too intently. He's been in rooms like this before, at Fairley, at the Admiralty Experimental Station near Helensburgh, quiet Scottish locks where scientists spoke in low voices about hydroacoustic signatures and narrowband noise, about how every ship, every propeller, every engine sang its own song through the water. They had told him something that at first sounded like wizardry. Given sensitive enough hydrophones and the right filters, you could hear a submarine long before you could see it, long before your ASDIC ping ever touched its hull. You could listen to the ocean floor, and it would whisper where the hunters were. He turns a gain knob, slowly. The roar rises, then separates. Machinery, sea swell, distant cavitation. He sweeps the array's reception angle, regulating which hydrophones in the long tail get priority. The strip chart flickers with pencil-thin traces, dancing to low-frequency beats. "Slow sweep, port to starboard," he murmurs. "Let's see who's singing out there." Beside him, Petty Officer Stokes stares at the paper. "That lot's just noise, sir." Fraser doesn't answer. His mind jumps back to Scotland. Dr. William Jock Stroud, civilian physicist in a rumpled suit, chalk in hand, standing before a blackboard covered in equations. "Submarines are not ghosts, gentlemen," Stroud had said, pacing. They are steel cylinders with rotating machinery. They vibrate, they cavitate, and sound travels in seawater a long way, longer than the Germans suspect, longer, frankly, than we suspected 3 years ago. He had topped the board, where simple curves showed the so-called deep sound channel, where layers of water bend and carry sound over vast distances. If we can put ears in the right place, on the seabed, towed behind your ships, we can hear them, not at a mile, at 10, at 20, in the right conditions. Back in the present, in the heaving, dark steel belly of Duke, Fraser adjusts a filter bank. A coarse, rumbling hiss falls away. Only a forest of discrete beats remains. Engines, propellers. He hears their own convoy first, a chorus of slow, labored screws, some slightly out of step, each merchantman wearing itself against the sea. Then, fainter, escort screws, fast, hard, disciplined. And then, like a whisper behind a curtain, something else, a higher speed rhythm, not quite aligned with the convoy's bearing. The beat is steady, tight, with that peculiar hollow modulation he has come to associate with submerged screws at periscope depth. He leans forward, eyes narrowing. Stokes, mark that trace. Bearing, approximately red 120 relative. Range, God knows, but she's not close. Not yet. The petty officer swallows. German, sir? Fraser listens a moment longer. He can almost hear Stroud again. The Type 7 boats have a very particular rhythm, and their electric motors leave a different acoustic footprint than diesels. Learn that pattern. It may save you before you ever see a torpedo wake. He speaks into the voice pipe, voice tight. Bridge, sound room. I have a possible submarine signature. Bearing red 120. Long range, beyond Aztec. She's there, sir. I can hear her screws. On the bridge, Markham freezes, fingers still on the chart edge. Beyond Aztec. Beyond radar. Beyond anything he can put a compass on with confidence. And yet, the man below sounds very sure. He steps back out into the rain-lashed night, eyes searching the black seam where sea meets sky, even though he knows there is nothing to see. The hunter is out there, and for the first time in the war, the ocean itself has spoken first. Very well, Mr. Fraser, he says quietly into the pipe. We'll trust your ears. He turns to the helmsman. Come starboard 10. Let's see if our Phantom doesn't find the convoy quite as easily as he thinks. Far astern, deep in the black water, the towed array swings, following the frigate's new course, its hydrophones listening to every shiver of metal in the deep. They are crude, experimental, temperamental. But they are the ancestors of something the U-boat captains cannot imagine, a future in which the ocean floor itself listens for them.
4 days earlier, May 13th, 1943, Garra Loch, Scotland. The loch is flat as glass beneath a low ceiling of cloud, the water a cold slate gray. At the end of a camouflage jetty, a Royal Navy launch lies alongside, bumping gently. Beyond, tucked among pine-dark hills, concrete bunkers and odd sheds mark the Admiralty Experimental Station, a place where men in uniform and men in rumpled tweed jackets work side by side, trying to coax secrets from the sea. In a chilly hut that smells of damp wood and solder, Lieutenant Alan Fraser stands with his cap tucked under his arm, listening as Dr. William Stroud sketches a diagram on a large sheet of paper. Think of it this way, Stroud says, his Scots accent softening his consonants. Your ASDC set, good, useful bit of kit, no doubt, shouts into the water and waits for the echo. But sound doesn't need you to shout, Lieutenant. It's out there all the time. Ships, waves, even whales, for God's sake. Noise upon noise.
He draws a line, then another parallel curve beneath it. These are layers in the sea, changes in temperature and salinity. Sound bends as it passes through them. Now, if you put a hydrophone here, he tops the lower curve, at the right depth, in the right conditions, it can pick up sound that's traveled a very long way, refracted back and forth like light in a lens. The Americans are doing similar work in the Pacific. We're not alone in this. Fraser frowns, arms folded over his greatcoat. Begging your pardon, Doctor, but the captain can't fight mathematicians' diagrams. He needs bearings, ranges. He needs something he can act on. Stroud smiles faintly, a weary expression from too many nights spent with graphs and oscilloscopes. Of course he does, and that's why we started with locks, Lieutenant. Controlled conditions, known sources. We tow a noisemaker, a simple electric motor or a propeller, at known bearings and distances. We listen from a fixed hydrophone on the bottom.
We measure what we get. He gestures towards the adjoining room where a bank of equipment hums. Filter boxes, amplifiers, cathode ray oscilloscopes, and a new instrument the Admiralty men call a sonic pattern recorder. Look here. They step into the next room. A rating in shirt sleeves is slowly winding a reel of chart paper. On the paper, thin inked lines dance in repeating bands, some darker, some faint. This, Stroud says, pointing to one band, is the target's propeller. These harmonic peaks, see, tell us the number of blades, the speed. If we know enough about German engineering, we can infer the class of boat. Type 7, Type 9. Each has machines that leave their own fingerprints. Fraser studies the marks. And the bottom hydrophones, the fixed ones? Stroud nods, pleased. Yes, a chain of them in shallow waters. The Yanks have talked of listening posts off their coasts. In time, perhaps we'll put them on the Atlantic shelf.
A deep, steady narration with a calm but commanding tone. Slightly gravelly, mature voice that carries the weight of wartime history. Clear, deliberate pacing, never rushed, allowing tension to build naturally. Subtle emotional restraint, controlled intensity during dramatic moments, quieter and reflective during tragic ones. Cinematic, documentary-style delivery with precise emphasis on names, dates, and actions. A voice that sounds authoritative, historical, and inevitable. But for the moment, it's arrays towed by your escorts that we can send to sea. He reaches for a folder on the desk, flipping it open to a photograph. A small, grainy image shows a wartime cutter at speed, a cable streaming from her stern. Towed arrays, Lieutenant. Strings of hydrophones spaced along a cable behind your ship, far enough back to escape your own propeller wash and hull noise. We combine their inputs, beamforming, the Americans call it, to focus on a bearing, to improve directivity. That's what you'll be sailing with in a few days. Fraser glances at the photograph again, then at the spools of cable coiled in the shed outside. And you're certain we can detect a submerged U-boat at, 20 miles? Stroud hesitates. I am certain you can sometimes detect a submerged U-boat at that distance. Calm seas help. Temperature profiles help. The right speed. You mustn't oversell this to your captain. It's an extra sense, not a crystal ball. He lowers his voice.
But make no mistake, Lieutenant. If we can refine these techniques, if we can place permanent hydrophones on the seabed, wired back to shore stations, we could one day know when an enemy submarine leaves its pens in Brittany. We could know when it passes through a gap in the Greenland, Iceland, UK line, long before it ever sights one of your convoys. Fraser blinks. The idea seems almost obscene in its scope. You're talking about lines of listening posts across the Atlantic? Stroud smiles again, more thinly this time. I'm talking about turning the ocean itself into a deterrent if we can. This war will end. Another might not be fought with destroyer escorts and Type 7 boats. There are already men in Washington and London thinking ahead to that. But for now, we start with one frigate, one cable, one slightly skeptical lieutenant. He caps his pen. You'll embark aboard HMS Duke tomorrow. Captain Markham has been persuaded to host our experimental circus.
He's lost ships on his watch, I'm told.
He may be more open to anything that gives him an edge against Dönitz's wolves. Fraser nods slowly, mind racing. And the Germans? Do they suspect we're listening like this? Stroud's face darkens. They know we use ASDIC. They think in terms of kings and echoes, of short ranges and sudden attacks. They do not, as far as we can tell, imagine that the deep sea itself might be carrying their signature to our ears. To them, distance is safety. He looks out the window toward the still lock. They assume the ocean is silent, Lieutenant. We are about to prove them wrong. A few hours later, as the launch carries Fraser toward the waiting freighter that will ferry himself, he watches the experimental station recede into the mist. The sheds, the cables, the humming equipment in those damp huts, they look like wartime improvisation, stopgaps. But he can't shake Stroud's words. Lines of listening posts, knowing when a boat leaves its pen. He turns up his collar against the cold spray and stares into the gray water streaming past the hull. If Stroud is right, and if they live long enough to see it, this is not just a wartime gadget. It is the first thread in a net that one day might cover the oceans.
May 17th, 1943, North Atlantic, 200 miles west of Ireland. 60 meters down, the sea is black and close, pressing in on worn steel plates with the steady, indifferent weight of the ocean. Kapitänleutnant Ernst Reuter stands in the control room of U-553, a Type 7C U-boat, one hand resting on the periscope well, the other gripping the chart table as the boat rolls gently in the swell. Around him, red lights glow faintly, picking out tense faces and sheen on oil-stained machinery. The atmosphere is metallic, humid, tinged with diesel and sweat. Depth 60 meters, speed 2 knots electric, the watch officer reports quietly. Reuter nods. Above them, somewhere in the night, he knows there is a convoy. The radio intercepts from BDU, the U-boat command in Paris, had been clear enough. Slow merchantmen, weak escort, a good opportunity. He allows himself a thin smile. The English cannot be everywhere, he had told his first watch officer as they trimmed the boat for submerged approach. Their ASDIC reaches only so far. At night, at range, the ocean is ours. Now he lifts his binoculars out of habit before realizing there is nothing to see but metal and shadows. He lowers them again, annoyed at himself. Hydrophone report, he says. In the bow compartment, Oberfunkmott Klaus Jäger sits with his own set of headphones, listening. He hears the convoy first, a low, continuous rumble, the overlapping screws of ships spread across kilometers of ocean. The pattern is familiar from years at sea. Convoy screws, Herr Kellium, he calls aft, bearing green 140 to 200, strongest around 170. Estimate range 5 to 8 kilometers. Escorts nearer, but I cannot yet separate them. Reuter nods, satisfied. ASDIC, radar, aircraft with flares and bombs. The ocean has grown more dangerous since 1940, since the happy time. But here, below the surface, with his diesels shut down and electric motors barely turning, he feels he has an edge again. They must see us to kill us, he says quietly to himself. Or they must hear us with their pings, and they cannot ping what is not close. He glances at the chart, at the convoy track BDU has given him. They are in roughly the right place, at roughly the right time, a hunter among blind cattle. Bring us up to periscope depth, 10 meters, slow, he orders. Balancing tanks hiss, the boat rises, creaking softly. At 9 meters, Reuter steps to the periscope column and grips the handles as it slides up with a hydraulic hiss.
He snaps it up, then eases the lens above the surface, water streaming off the glass. Night. Wind. A fractured line of darker shapes against a slightly less dark horizon. Merchantmen, zigzagging. He turns slowly. No escort in sight.
No destroyer crossing the convoy's head. No star shells, no searchlights. He smiles again, broader this time. Good. Very good. He drops back down, orders ready on his tongue. He never imagines that 15 miles away, a British frigate he cannot see has already heard him. He has no concept for how such a thing could be possible. In the British Admiralty's files, there are cautious memoranda typed by civil servants who never smelled diesel or brine, speaking of passive long-range detection systems and hydrophone chains on the continental shelf. In Reuters' worlds beneath the Atlantic, those phrases might as well be from a fantasy novel. His mental map of danger looks like this. ASIC range, maybe 2,000 yards. Radars, especially the new centimetric sets, can see his conning tower at perhaps 8,000 yards. Aircraft, if they catch him on the surface, can attack quickly, but only if they see him first.
Beyond that, beyond those circles of steel around each enemy ship, the ocean is empty. Sound dissipates. Silence is safety. He has never been to a scientific lecture about sound channels. He has never seen Stroud's diagrams. He believes, like almost all his comrades, that the sea keeps secrets at scale. When U-553 had last been in port at St. Nazaire, there had been rumors, of course, talk in the sailors' pub of new English listening tricks, something about magnetic detection, something about new radar. A radio technician had mentioned that the British were getting better at picking up their short radio bursts, those brief signals back to BDU reporting convoy positions. But no one had suggested that a ship dozens of kilometers away, or some unseen apparatus on the ocean floor, might be listening for the rhythm of his screws. Reuter turns from the periscope, satisfied with his firing position. Come to course 085. Maintain depth.
We will let the convoy pass, then turn in behind them. He looks at Jaeger. Hydrophones. You will listen for escort screws closing. If they ping early, we dive deep and slip beneath them until they have passed. But they must come close, understand? They cannot. He stops, not bothering to finish the sentence. No one in the boat doubts it. No one has reason to. The chief engineer wipes a hand on his overalls, listening with half an ear. The watch officer stares at the depth gauge, already calculating angles for the attack. Outside the pressure hull, their screws turn slowly, pushing the boat through a column of water that stretches from the surface to the seabed, every rotation sending low-frequency vibrations rippling outward in all directions. They fade with distance, yes. The sea absorbs, bends, diffuses. But not completely. Not tonight. Afar below the thermal layers, in places where cold, dense water pools and spreads, those vibrations begin to travel along paths that Reuter has never imagined, refracting and bending along invisible, gently curving ducts. 15 miles off, HMS Duke's towed array feels a subtle change in the background murmur. One of its hydrophones detects a faint, regular beat at just the right frequency, just the right pattern. In the cramped compartment aboard Duke, Fraser straightens suddenly, one hand going to the gain knob. "There you are," he whispers. U-553 glides on, unaware that somewhere beyond the horizon, the ocean itself has betrayed her position to an enemy whose eyes no longer end with the range of a periscope or a radar set.
For the first time in this patch of dark North Atlantic, the old calculus of distance and safety is beginning to tilt.
Back aboard HMS Duke, the deck groans as another wave smashes against the bow, spray hammering the bridge windows. Inside the sound room, the world has narrowed to paper, needles, and the low, insistent murmur in Fraser's headphones. He leans over the strip chart recorder, tracing a finger along a darker, rhythmic band that threads steadily across the paper. See that, Stokes? That's not one of ours. Too clean, too isolated. 4-bladed screw, I'd say. Speed, call it 3, maybe 4 knots. Submerged, not racing. Stokes squints. How can you tell speed from that, sir? Fraser taps the trace. The spacing between these peaks, harmonics of the blade rate. We know roughly how big their propellers are and how fast they turn at different speeds. Admiralty intelligence, bless them, keep dossiers on such things. This isn't a bloody crystal set, Stokes. It's a fingerprint. He reaches for the bearing indicator connected to the beamformer, an electromechanical device that, when he weights different hydrophones in the array, gives him a preferential direction. He sweeps slowly. The volume rises, falls, like turning one's head toward and away from a distant engine. Best bearing red 115 relative, he mutters. He picks up the sound-powered phone. Bridge, sound room, contact confirmed, submarine acoustic signature, bearing red 115, estimated speed 3 to 4 knots, probably submerged, range unknown but beyond ASDC. She's pacing the convoy, sir. On the bridge, Markham presses the receiver to his ear, jaw tight. Beyond ASDC, but close enough to count her propeller blades, he says, mostly to himself. Miraculous. He steps over to the navigator and points at the chart. Mark a notional contact here, bearing 115 from our position. Give her an approximate track parallel to the convoy.
We'll assume she's aiming to get astern and pick off any stragglers. He looks up at the dark sea again. We'll not let her. Below, Fraser and Stokes work rapidly. They log bearings every few minutes, building a crude track out of numbers and intuition. The submarine's bearing creeps slowly as Duke alters course, trying to cut across her unseen path. Her bearing is changing slowly to green, sir, Fraser reports. Either she's turning, or we are, Stokes mutters. Both, I expect, Fraser replies. But see how steady her speed trace is. She doesn't know we're here. If she suspected we had her, she'd change speed, run deeper. We'd hear the change. There is a strange, almost indecent intimacy to it, knowing so much about a ship they cannot see, her speed, her likely class, that her captain still thinks he is safe. On the bridge, the radar set hums, sweeping its electronic eye across an empty sky. The ASD set, when the operator tests it with a brief series of pings, returns nothing but the expected clutter. Only the trailing cable, invisible in the dark water astern, is doing its work. Markham glances at his first lieutenant. If Fraser is wrong, we are steering the convoy on the word of a magician and a length of wire, he says quietly. The first lieutenant shrugs. With respect, sir, we've steered convoys on less. Codes, guesses, rumors from Coastal Command. At least Mr. Fraser can point to wiggly lines on paper. Markham almost laughs, then sobers. Very well. Signal the convoy Commodore. Altering course to intercept suspected U-boat threat. Maintain current zigzag. No need to tell them we're chasing a noise. The lamp flashes into the night. In the sound room, Fraser adjusts a filter, narrowing the band he's listening to. The convoy's own rumble drops further into the background, leaving the submarine's beat clearer. He thinks of Stroud's sketches again.
A deep, steady narration with a calm but commanding tone, slightly gravelly, mature voice that carries the weight of wartime history. Clear, deliberate pacing, never rushed, allowing tension to build naturally. Subtle emotional restraint, controlled intensity during dramatic moments, quieter and reflective during tragic ones. Cinematic, documentary-style delivery with precise emphasis on key names, dates, and actions. A voice that sounds authoritative, historical, and inevitable. Of seabed hydrophones that one day might dot the continental shelf, connected by cables to hidden bunkers on land. This is different, cruder, messier. A single escort with a tail, trying to hear through her own noise. But the principle is the same. The ocean is no longer mute. "Contact steady, sir," he says into the phone a few minutes later. "Bearing now red 095. She's either crossing our bow at a distance or we're swinging in behind her." Markham makes a decision. "Come to course 090, increase to 15 knots. He knows it will dirty the water for Fraser, his own screws roaring, cavitation rising. But if they can get close enough, if they can shrink that mysterious, long range down into something the ASDC can bite, then they can stop being a blind listener and start being a hunter again." Deep in the hull, the engines wind up. Duke shudders, leaning into the sea. Fraser winces as the background roar surges in his phones. A deep, steady narration, with a calm but commanding tone. Slightly gravelly, mature voice that carries the weight of wartime history. Clear, deliberate pacing, never rushed, allowing tension to build naturally. Subtle emotional restraint, controlled intensity during dramatic moments, quieter and reflective during tragic ones. Cinematic, documentary-style delivery with precise emphasis on key names, dates, and actions. A voice that sounds authoritative, historical, and inevitable. He turns down the gain, tightening the filters, straining to hold on to the faint, regular beat that is their quarry. For a moment, he loses it. Panic prickles. Come on," he mutters. "Don't you vanish on me now." Then, faintly, through the roar, the beat returns. The trace darkens again on the paper. "Got you," he breathes. "Bridge, sound, contact still present. Bearing now red 085. We're closing, sir," slowly. Markham exhales. "As soon as you think she's within ASDIC range, I want our operator to paint her. One clean attack run if we can manage it. Surprise will be our ally." A mile below the surface of his thoughts, something else stirs. If this works, if they can guide escorts in on U-boats using nothing but their propeller songs, convoys need no longer stumble blindly through the wolf packs. They can steer around them, or drive into them, teeth first. "Very well, Mr. Fraser," he says. "Keep your ears open. The next move is hers and ours." Out astern, the cable hums faintly in the dark water, hydrophones turning the subtle shivers of a distant steel hull into tiny electrical impulses. They travel up the wire, into Duke, into a cramped room where a tired young officer and a cynical petty officer interpret them as life and death. On U-553, Router feels nothing different. He hears nothing new. The water around him seems as silent and neutral as ever. He has no idea that for the first time in his career, his danger zone has expanded far beyond the circle of A-stick pings he fears. The ocean is listening farther than he dreams. 30 minutes later, the sea has grown rougher, the convoy's scattered lights rolling on the horizon like a broken string of beads. On U-553, Router judges that he has drifted beneath the convoy's rear quarter. His hydrophono reporter reports the familiar pattern, merchant screws passing ahead, their beat shifting as they cross his bow and fade astern. "Escorts?" Router asks. Jaeger tilts his head, listening. "One, maybe two, Herr Kalun, bearings uncertain, farther out. Their screws are distinct, faster, firmer." Router nods. "Very well, we will come to periscope depth again. Prepare for attack." He feels the familiar tightening in his gut. This is the part of the war he still loves, the hunt,
the mathematics of torpedo angles, the exhilaration of striking at the enemy's artery. Trim for 10 meters, he orders. Outside, water sluices off the U-boat's hull as she rises silently. At 10 meters, the periscope breaks the surface again. Router raises it, sweeping.
He sees the convoy now, clearly. Dark holes, dim shielded lights, faint wakes glowing in the night. A fat freighter lags slightly, just enough to tempt him. He does not see the shape that has slipped in from the convoy's flank, her bow angled inward, closing. HMS Duke has found her. In the sound room, Fraser's voice is taut. Bridge, sound. Contact now at estimated 6,000 to 7,000 yards, bearing red 070, broad on the bow. Her screw beat is rising slightly. She may be coming shallow, sir. On the bridge, the Aztec operator listens for orders. Markham doesn't hesitate. Aztec to active search, sector red 060 to 080, short pulse, low repetition. Let's see if our ghost has a hull after all. The Aztec dome beneath Duke's hull begins to sing. Short, sharp pings ripple out through the water, slicing across the unseen gap. In U-553's control room, the first ping arrives like a slap. A bright, metallic ping reverberates through the hull, echoing in the cramped compartment. Men flinch instinctively. Reuter's head snaps up. Aztec, bearing? Jaeger is already shouting. Bearing green 100, range unknown. Reuter curses. How in God's name? He had calculated his position, his depth, his timing. He is not yet within what he believes to be normal Aztec range of a destroyer, yet here it is, clear, unmistakable. On Duke, the Aztec operator calls out. Echo, sir, strong return, bearing red 073, range 6,000 yards, closing. Markham feels a surge of grim satisfaction. Mr. Fraser, he says into the voice pipe, you have earned your rum tonight. Stand by, all hands, action stations. The bells clang through the ship. Men race to depth charge throwers, to guns, to damage control posts, the familiar wartime choreography. But beneath it all, something new moves, the knowledge that this attack run started long before the first ping. It began with a faint, almost inaudible beat in the towed array, far outside the U-boat captain's mental map of danger. Reuters snaps orders. Crash dive, take her to 150 meters, full speed ahead, then hard turn to port. We'll go under him. The boat tilts, bow dropping. Men grab for handholds. In the sound room aboard Duke, Fraser hears it. Contact increasing speed, sir. Screw frequency up, she's diving. The ASDC operator confirms it. Target changing aspect, sir. Echo losing strength, she's going deep. Markham narrows his eyes. Keep her in the beam. Helmsman, steer for the predicted intercept. We'll lay a pattern across his likely path. Duke charges forward, her bow cutting the swell, her wake boiling. The towed array strains in the water, cable taut. In the sea below, sound waves from her ASDC set bounce off the diving U-boat, returns growing weaker as depth and angle change. For a few tense seconds, the echo wavers. Lost contact, sir. The Aztec operator calls. He's gone deep, below the main lobe. Fraser, listening, slams a fist softly against the console. Don't you dare, he mutters. Move, and I'll hear you. And he does. Even deep, at 100 meters, at 150, U-553's sudden maneuvers leave marks. A burst of increased cavitation as her propeller bites harder. A new rhythm as she turns. Bridge, sound. Acoustic contact still present at long range, even if Aztec loses him. Bearing shifting left, he's turning under us, sir. Markham processes this rapidly. So even when he ducks under our Aztec beam, the tail can still feel him from behind. He makes another choice. Very well, we'll overlap the old and the new, maintain course. Drop pattern Baker when we pass his last firm echo. Then we come around and do it again, guided by Mr. Fraser's magic. He rings for attack speed. On U-553, Reuter hears the faint whine of approaching propellers growing, then the heavier, more ominous rattle.
Depth charges. "Brace for impact," he shouts. The first pattern of charges rolls off Duke's stern, K-guns hurling others wide to either side. They sink, spinning, clattering, fuses ticking. Then the sea erupts. The hull of U-553 bucks as detonations slam the water above and around her. Lights flicker, dust and paint rain down. A gauge cracks, spraying a fine mist. "Minor leaks in forward compartments," someone yells. "Hold her steady," Reuter roars. "Maintain depth." He grits his teeth. They must have stumbled on us. They can't know we were here from that far out. They can't. He has no way to reconcile his mental model of the war with what has just happened. An attack apparently launched from beyond the range of first contact, a destroyer closing in on him as if guided by some unseen thread.
Up above, Duke thunders past the estimated position, depth charges boiling her wake. Men on deck feel the shock through the hull. On the bridge, Markham grips the rail, eyes on the churning water astern. "AS Deke, any sign?" "Negative, sir. No firm echo. Lots of disturbance." "Sound room." Fraser's voice is tight but steady. "I still have him, sir. We hurt him or rattled him, but he's moving. Bearing now green 050 relative. Deeper, speed reduced but constant. He's not dead yet." Markham nods once. Then we go again. He looks out into the dark, rain-lashed Atlantic. This ancient battlefield now crisscrossed by pings and whispers, by old and new forms of sound. "We are not just chasing periscopes anymore," he says quietly, mostly to himself. "We are chasing ghosts in the deep. And tonight, at least, the ghosts are a little less invisible."
Below them, U-553 limps on, deeper into the black water. Her captain still believing that if he can just get far enough away, just get deep enough, the ocean will swallow his traces and return to silence. He does not yet understand that the silence has changed.
For the next hour, the battle becomes a grim rhythm. HMS Duke circles, guided alternately by SDIC echoes and Fraser's low-frequency bearings from the towed array. Each time they think they have the U-boat's path, another pattern of depth charges rolls off the stern, churning the Atlantic into froth. U-553 dives, turns, creeps, trying every trick Reuter has learned since 1939. At one point, he orders the boat to lie still at 200 meters, engine stopped, hoping to become just another lump of cold metal in the deep. In the sudden quiet, the crew can hear their own breathing, the creak of the hull, the soft ticking of cooling pipes. "Hydrophones," Reuter whispers. Yeager listens. "I hear distant screws. They've moved off, maybe. Faint. Bearing changing slowly." Reuter clings to that hope. "Good. We stay silent. The Englishman thinks in short ranges. His deafness grows with distance. We just need to outweight his attention." It is a logic that has worked, sometimes, in the early years. Destroyers making a few aggressive passes, then giving up, needing to return to their convoy. He has not yet met an enemy with ears that stretch far beyond the reach of their pings. On Duke, Fraser frowns at the strip chart. The dark trace that had been so clear has faded, but not vanished. It has become intermittent, pulsing singly as water layers and distance play tricks. He's slowed, maybe stopped, Fraser says quietly, but he's still there, like a heart beating under a pillow. Stokes glances at him. "Do we tell the captain he's not gone, sir? After an hour of banging, he might like to think the bastard's broken in half by now." Fraser thinks of Stroud, of the men in the huts by that Scottish lock. "We tell him the truth," he says, "that the ocean is still carrying this one to us." He picks up the phone. Bridge, sound. Contact persists at very low level.
A deep, steady narration with a calm but commanding tone. slightly gravelly, mature voice that carries the weight of wartime history. Clear, deliberate pacing, never rushed, allowing tension to build naturally. Subtle emotional restraint, controlled intensity during dramatic moments, quieter and reflective during tragic ones. Cinematic, documentary-style delivery with precise emphasis on key names, dates, and actions. A voice that sounds authoritative, historical, and inevitable. Bearing green 300, range uncertain, but still within our long-range sensitivity. He's gone quiet, sir, but he hasn't disappeared. On the bridge, Markham feels the fatigue in his legs, in the set of his shoulders. Convoy duty is usually a test of endurance. Long hours, brief spikes of terror, then more long hours. Tonight has been different, more like stalking a wounded animal by scent, not sight. He glances at the convoy's distant lights. They have already drawn far ahead, the Commodore trusting that Duke's aggression has bought them a pocket of safety. "How long can you keep tracking him, Mr. Fraser?" he asks. There's a pause. "As long as conditions hold, sir. As long as he moves at all. But the longer we chase one boat, the farther we are from the convoy. There are others out here." Markham knows it. This is a tactical choice and a strategic glimpse. A deep, steady narration with a calm but commanding tone, slightly gravelly, mature voice that carries the weight of wartime history. Clear, deliberate pacing, never rushed, allowing tension to build naturally. Subtle emotional restraint, controlled intensity during dramatic moments, quieter and reflective during tragic ones. Cinematic, documentary-style delivery with precise emphasis on key names, dates, and actions. A voice that sounds authoritative, historical, and inevitable. Spend a night and most of a day hounding one U-boat based on long-range acoustics, or trust that driving him down and wounding him is enough, then sprint back to the herd. He makes the conservative choice. Very well, we have bloodied him and bought the convoy time. We will make one more pass, then break off and rejoin. He adds, more quietly. Log everything, Mr. Fraser. Bearings, levels, your best guesses at range. The Boffins in Whitehall will want it all. If this sort of thing wins us one fight today, they'll want it to win us 10 in the next war. On U-553, Reuter finally allows the engines to turn again, just a fraction. Slow ahead. Rudder 5 degrees to port. Let's ease out of here, he says. He feels bruised, shaken, but not yet defeated. We were unlucky, he tells his first watch officer. Perhaps they had an escort too close by. Next time we approach from farther out. The ocean is big. They cannot hear everything. Above, Fraser's pencil moves. There.
A slight increase in screw rate. Bearing shifting again, he says softly. He thinks he's slipping the net. Duke makes one last measured run over the estimated position, dropping a smaller pattern this time, more for persuasion than execution. The charges detonate, a final series of hammer blows in the depths. In U-553, one of the lights fails completely. A pipe bursts in the aft compartment, spraying a thin jet of water that the engineer's crew scramble to contain. Reuter looks at the men around him, pale, tired, eyes wide. "That's enough for one night," he says bitterly. "We break off. We go deep and away. The convoy will be miles ahead now." He feels cheated by the ocean itself, betrayed by distance. Later, as U-553 limps away at depth, radio silent, hull strained, he will write in his war diary of aggressive enemy ASDC and remarkable speed and precision in the escorts attacks. He will not write of any suspicion that the enemy knew he was there long before the first ping. He cannot write it. It would sound like superstition. In London, months later, officers in the Anti-Submarine Warfare Division will read Fraser's report on the engagement. They will study the plotted bearings, the acoustic traces, the timings between first long-range detection, first ASDC contact, and the depth charge winds. Some will be skeptical, others will be quietly electrified.
Across the Atlantic, in American laboratories in places like New London and San Diego, similar reports are being filed, stamped secret, describing long-range detections of Japanese submarines using seabed hydrophones and primitive towed arrays. Men in uniform and in suits will begin to sketch lines on maps, from Newfoundland to Ireland, from Alaska to Japan. Lines where, one day, permanent cables might run, feeding the outputs of vast networks of seabed hydrophones back to listening centers on the shore.
The names are not yet coined. There is no SOSUS in 1943, only phrases like fixed acoustic surveillance system, barrier concept, oceanic sound channels. But the idea has taken root. Back in the cold Atlantic, Duke finally turns away, engines rising as she sprints to regain her place alongside the convoy. The towed array reels in slowly, dripping in the gray dawnlight, its hydrophones glistening like the eyes of some deep-sea creature hauled briefly into another world. Fraser stands by as the ratings winch aboard, arms folded, collar up against the wind. Stokes glances at him. "Do you think we got him, sir?" Fraser watches the cable sway. "I think we kept him off the convoy," he says. "And I think we proved that the ocean doesn't keep their secrets quite as well as they think." He looks out over the white-capped swells. "One day, Stokes, they'll lay these things on the bottom, shore to shore, listening all the time."
A boat like that won't be able to leave port without someone, somewhere, hearing it. Stokes snorts. "Sounds like witchcraft, sir." Fraser smiles faintly. "So did radar once." He turns back toward the dimly lit interior of the frigate, toward the humming boxes and strip charts that have just nudged the war, ever so slightly, toward a different future. Far astern, somewhere in the deep, U-553 creeps away, battered but afloat. Her captain still believes that, given enough distance, the sea will swallow his trail. He does not know that this battle, one among thousands, will be remembered less for its final tally of ships sunk than for the quiet realization it contained. The ocean floor was listening, and soon it would never stop.